Take on your day the sweet way with the new brown sugar cold brew at Dunkin' Donuts. Cold steep for 12 hours with a sweetness that'll charm the taste buds off the go-getter in you. That's right, bold and sweet have finally come together in a deliciously infused cold brew that's naturally flavored and totally smooth. Dunkin's new brown sugar cold brew. Bold meets sweet. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer.
Que yo va a subir y usted va a bajar con los zapatos de changote, mi changota, changoteito Dios va a talar y papá lo ayer. Padre mío San Lázaro, ay Padre mío Padre mío San Lázaro, ayúdanos en nombre de Dios. Padre mío San Lázaro, ay pero que sea de corazón. Padre mío San Lázaro.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Divination Table. I'm your host, Michael Lennon, and today's special guest is an independent scholar, writer, teacher, and professional tarot consultant who has been studying and reading tarot for the past 50 years. She has a master's in English literature from the University of Central Florida, where she also first taught tarot in 1974 and continuing to teach it for 11 years at New College of California in San Francisco. She's the author of 11 books on tarot and on magic, and was the first to write about reading tarot for oneself. She pioneered what is called the R.I.T.E method, reading that are interactive, transformational, and empowering, featured at most tarot conferences in the U.S. and abroad, and travels the world teaching Tarot and Lenormand. Let me bring our special guest, Mary K. Greer, online.
Hi,
Good
Michael.
evening. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I'm fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm so happy to have you here. This is a true honor to have one of the biggest historians and, readers and teachers, in the tarot community, coming live with us on show.
Well, thank you. It's my favorite topic to talk about.
I have gathered that, and I have read, you've written a number of books. You've got like 11, or am I missing a few?
Well, the latest one, that may not be on the numbered list, which is the Pamela Coleman Smith, The Untold Story, that I collaborated on with 3 other people.
And can you explain what the book is about?
It's about the life and artwork of Pamela Coleman Smith. And actually more than just her artwork, because she was also a storyteller, performer. She was just many things. So being an artist, she created the artwork for the deck that's known as the Rider-Waite deck, or the Waite-Smith or Smith-Waite deck. Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's got to be an incredible book to collaborate on and to, come out. Is it available now, or is it just coming out?
It's just out, although I understand the very first set has sold out, and so the next, they've got more coming almost immediately.
Oh, that's got to be phenomenal. And I know you have won numerous awards. I mean, you received the International Tarot Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association of Tarot Studies, as well as a 2006 Mercury Award from the Mary Redman Foundation for excellence in communication in the metaphysical field. What is it that drives you? I mean, because I know you've been doing this, your entire lifetime. This is a major achievement to spend the amount of time. Where do you get your inspiration? Where do you get that drive, to keep going?
Well, the whole reason why I keep going with tarot is that it's endlessly fascinating. There's so many dimensions to it. So I still love the reading cards for people. I love teaching, but the inspiration keeps coming because you can actually study tarot from the point of view of history, of mathematics, of psychology, of art, of course, the divination and metaphysical studies, the whole range of metaphysical studies, whether you get into Kabbalah or numerology or astrology, and more even in the academic fields. So, I mean, neuropsychology and neuroscience, there's so much that it's telling us about what intuition is and how we use it, and how it might be used best in tarot readings. So I go off on that. And then the whole thing about emotions and what are human emotions, because what's the thing that everyone comes to tarot readings for? And the truth is that most of the really popular decks, many people may not realize it, but the emotions that are expressed on them, I did a research project with nearly 100 people, and the emotions that they were seeing in the cards were almost exactly the same among most of those 100 people.
Wow. See, I'm one of those people. I always had this, I have a hard time with tarot, and I just can't seem to get it. I study, Lenormand's, T cards, bone reading, soul cards. I'm a very intuitive and very symbolic style of reader.
Uh-huh.
And I've tried off and on for like 15 years to try and, learn how to read the tarot. And for some reason, I just can't grasp that particular tool. What would you recommend, for new people coming into divination, coming into wanting to learn how to read the tarot, as a good place to start? I mean, like, I know you sell, a lot of different types of books. What would be a good starting point for somebody, especially like somebody like me, for example?
Well, the fact that you say that you really love symbols and that you read symbols and yet you can't get into the cards, I would imagine that part of the problem is that you think you have to follow a system. And with tarot, there are those people who really connect with the idea of a system, memorize meanings, memorized correspondences with astrology or Kabbalah or whatever else. And then there are the people who simply look at the cards and tell stories. And then another group entirely are the ones who look at the cards and look deeply into the symbols from a projective perspective, as in Carl Jung's archetypes. So looking at what those archetypal messages are and what their own projections are. So with Tarot for Yourself, I really recommend starting out with a very simple exercise of simply describing a card as literally as possible, as if you would want a police artist to be able to draw it without seeing it. So, what clothes are they wearing? What color are they? What's in the background? Are they holding anything? If someone says to me, well, there's a king on the card, I say, what makes you think it's a king? What's in the picture that makes you think that? It's amazing if you start with that, and then I have several steps where you go a little deeper. You talk about what seems to be the feelings and emotions of the figures on the card and the atmosphere of the environment. And so you're going a little deeper. And then I have people make up a fairy tale about it. And by that time, you never even are very deep into them. Plus, in the majority of cases, I can open a standard book on tarot and show them where things they've said are actually the things that are in the book as meanings. And the anomalies, the things they see that are different than that, are often keys, very deep keys to their own situation.
All right, and that makes a lot of sense. Because I am one of those, I'm a visual person. I've always been, symbols, symbolic divination, but I've also always been one to, tell people and teach people, learn whatever it is system that you're working with. Learn the fundamental meanings, learn the baseline of everything. And I think that's where I get stuck is, I try to learn the book meanings. I try to remember, all the different things, the reversed, the not reversed, how they pair together. And, it always was a struggle for me because I guess I was fighting with myself and with my style that I have used for years on so many other forms of divination, that I haven't really looked at it that particular way.
Right.
Because I like to walk the same talk. If I tell people this is what I think you should do, it's also the same thing that I myself would do.
Uh-huh.
So I've struggled off and on for like 15 years. It's just like I'll pick them up, I'll start studying, I'll start reading. I think I'll start getting them, and then they don't make any sense. So I think I might have to try doing that. Do you have a book that you've written on this particular type of subject?
For that approach, there's two books. One is Tarot for Yourself, a workbook for personal transformation, and that was my first book. And then a much more recent book is called 21 Ways to Read a Tarot Card. And theoretically, you go through the entire book reading one tarot card. Of course, I give you permission if you really want to change, you can. But then you have to go back to the beginning and go through very quickly some of the beginning steps just so that you get that basis, as I said, describing the card, looking at the feelings, emotions, and attitudes of the figures, storytelling, those kinds of things. And that is what allows you to enter the card individually. Partway through the book, 21 Ways, probably, a third of the way through, I mentioned some of the keyword meanings based on number and suit, but I don't start with that. And that's deliberate for the style of reading I do. I call my readings interactive in that I'm often guiding the client through the kinds of steps I've just mentioned. And I'm listening to that and helping them hear their own wisdom.
Okay, so you're empowering. Yeah, I was going to say you're empowering people to really look within themselves and connect with their intuition and their own, style of reading that has yet to come out.
Definitely. Although the way I like to think of it is I'm creating a sacred space for them to find their own empowerment, for them to really get in touch with that in the moment. And I'm simply a midwife of the soul, to assist them in bringing their own wisdom to birth. Because a woman who's pregnant, she's the one, her and the baby, do the work. And unless it's a real problem situation, the midwife is there to encourage, to support, to help. And that's my role, to make suggestions, to guide, rather than to tell. Now, in an actual reading, and the shorter the reading is, the more I'm a little more directive, I'm a little more active in the reading. In a 10 or 15-minute reading, I take much more of the lead. I give a little more background. But I always try to get some involvement. And in a full-length reading, which I consider to be an hour, I'm really guiding very much the person through their own reading. And I always let them know what I see also at some point.
Those are the kinds of readings that I love. The interactive ones, the ones where your client, is working with you and looking for the information, because it's not always, as a diviner, because I do think that there's differences between just a diviner, just a reader and a diviner. Our job is to help the person or our client uncover things, work through things, move themselves. It's not just, here's a quick answer, here's the yes or the no. It's, what steps does this person need to take? How can they move from this place in life to the next place? How can they go around any obstacles that may pop up? And oftentimes, it's not just a matter of us saying, hey, here's what you need to do, because it's more about what they feel that they really need to do in order to get out of their own way and to move into another space, or to move past certain blocks. Because they have, like you said, they have all that wisdom already within them. It's a matter of them bringing it out. And, we're the vessels, we're the stewards, we're the ones that just say, hey, look, you know what? Inch you away a little bit. Let me help push you a little bit. Let me help open you up. Because it's not about us, as the reader or the diviner.
And the biggest changes happen when a person recognizes something for themselves. If I give someone an answer, I have the power. I knew something they couldn't possibly know. They'd have to come back to me when they have their next major choice. And I have no interest in creating that kind of a dependency. And I don't see how that benefits them at all. I would much rather have them say at some point, that's not right, Mary. It's really this. And for them to have their eyes light up and suddenly realize that, I would consider a totally successful reading.
Yes, and I'll agree with that. The best things, I've never liked, and it might sound kind of weird to some of the listeners on the show, I don't like repeat customers. Yeah. Because those are the ones, they're dependent. I don't want people that are dependent. I want people that are going to be able to be lifted, to help elevate them in life. And when they call me 6 months, a year, 2 years later saying, hey, I just want to say thank you. You helped me open my eyes. You've helped me to be able to see where I need to go. That's the best news I can ever hear, rather than somebody calling up going, hey, I got some major stuff going on. I really need to see you. Yeah. And, giving people the permission sometimes, which is what some people need, to make the choices that they need to make. Because sometimes, people are afraid to make a choice, whether it's a right choice or a wrong choice. We still have to learn, in life. And we do that by making choices, what good ones or bad ones, we learn from each one, how we can do things different. And I love that approach, because it really does help a person's soul and their spirit to be able to transform their life into something completely new and different.
Yeah. Yeah, an in-depth tarot reading should help the person see a couple of options and get clarity about which options are more along the line of what their own values, and also that goal clarification, so that they can become clearer about what their real direction is, what their purpose is, because that's often the key to making a choice. Which choice is most in alignment with qualities you most want to develop in yourself, or a goal that you most want to reach. And if you can get clarity about that, about what your options are and what your goal or your personal development is, then you're really on the right track to being able to make the decisions for yourself.
And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to, give to people. It's one of the things that I love because, I stalk people, not in a bad way. Before I had people on the show, I check out their sites, I check out their blogs, I check out, things that they've contributed to the community. I follow them around, and I mean, I've known you for your name for years because I've been in the community for years, and I have, read some of your books. I have, I think I got a couple still here. I'm going to reread because they're all on the tarot, and I keep getting myself frustrated.
Good for you. Read my books.
And you've contributed so much. It's to be able to offer the wisdom that you offer in, like 50 years, continuing to contribute, continuing to help people become better readers and see different ways to be able to view, some of the material and the cards, from different angles. That is a phenomenal feat. And I can see how they have given you, lifetime achievement awards and, excellence in communication and, all of these awards are completely well-deserved.
Yeah, well, part of that in terms of education is the experiential learning. And when I first started out in the 60s, it was still primarily rote learning. By the time I moved to San Francisco in the 70s, that the whole Bay Area and west coast of San Francisco was really exploring experiential learning and kind of crossover between encounter groups and various therapy things, personal insight work, and how that can be used in classes so that students have their own insights through some kind of experience in a class rather than sitting down and rote learning. I can point people to books where if you want to memorize things, go ahead, here they are. But we're not going to take very much class time with that other than to just point out some key ideas that will help you sort all of that information out. But the majority of the time we're going to be doing experiences that are going to teach you what it's about. And I think that's one of my major contributions. It's very much what Tarot for Yourself was all about, was how to learn the cards through doing stuff with them. And there's a lot of people who've responded. I've noticed on Amazon comments where they go, she didn't tell me what the meanings were, and that's what I wanted. And I'm going, fine, there's hundreds of books that do that. And that's perfectly fine if that's how you learn best. But especially when I first started, there weren't very many books that had any experiential learning, or if it did, it was just, a little exercise at the end of a section of a teaching section. And so I really consider my number one contribution is that experiential approach to learning tarot and to reading tarot in that very personal way.
And I kind of like that way because, even though I am a stickler for tradition on a lot of things, I also understand, as a human being and myself, knowing how I work and how I learn best, that's what helps me most. I'm the hands-on type of person. I'm the visual kind of guy. I could read books for days and not get a single thing. Mm-hmm. But when it is shown to me in a different light, that's when I tend to excel, because there are countless books out that are all about the definitions, all about the meanings, all about the, traditional, the traditional correspondences, but yet every person learns differently. For some, those types of books work incredible. For others, it's like looking at a technical book, and you're looking at a blueprint, and you're trying to figure out, the mathematics without understanding math. Mm-hmm. I'm also not a numbers guy, so I can't, the mathematic part doesn't work for me either.
Well,
Yeah.
I had to develop my style because I can't memorize anything. That's my my biggest problem. If I didn't have my computer, I wouldn't have my memory. I often say, because I throw everything in there. And I love to study material. Since I have gotten into tarot, I've certainly studied the Golden Dawn system. I've even taught the very precise way in which they read the cards, which involved memorized meanings and memorized correspondences and very particular processes of it. But that was later, after I already had a feel for the cards. I already had a relationship, and it was one of the directions I took in expanding my abilities and stretching myself into places that were uncomfortable after I had already found why I was so drawn to the cards, what they were trying to say to me. And, everyone has their own way in. There's some people who say the very first thing you should do before you do anything else in tarot is learn about their history. I love the history of tarot, but there's only a few people who I think are really going to get into the tarot through starting with an in-depth look at the history. Most people will be overwhelmed and go, what does this have to do with anything? Later, it becomes infinitely fascinating, or at least for me.
Well, I think it does for a lot. I mean, the first step I always do is, learning the system itself. But as I develop, it's just like, I got to find out more about this. I got to find out where this comes from. Why do I connect so well with, certain kinds of cards, like T cards, very fluid, very, interactive, very visual and symbolic. Where do they come from? And now I find myself wanting to learn more about the history, as opposed to learning how to read them. I now want to understand them on a different level. It's like a relationship. It's like getting to know a person. I know this person, but now I want to know why they tick, how they tick, how they became the person that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that it, for most people anyway, I think that it flows naturally in that progression rather than starting with the history part first and coming, into that love of particular cards from the history.
Well, you'd be surprised at the number of historians who insist on history first. I think you can do well with one page of history to start. And then if that's what really pulls you, that there's plenty of material online and some wonderful books that you can delve more deeply into the historical aspect. One of the things you'll find is that the tarot, which did not come from Egypt or the Gypsies, it's very well documented that it appeared first in early 15th century northern Italy, probably Milan or Ferrara, perhaps Florence. We keep turning up records that kind of stretch the whole idea of where exactly it was. But they weren't used for divination, at least as we know it, for several hundred years. So the tarot meanings that we learn are a made-up system, in contradistinction to some cartomancy decks like the Lenormand deck, which was designed to do readings with very particular meanings. It's actually, I consider, more emblematic rather than symbolic. We don't do that kind of projective, archetypal symbolism that we do with tarot. With Lenormand, it's more like an emblem that has set fixed meanings off of which you can riff when it happens, when your intuition tells you to. But you really need to know those kind of emblematic, precise meanings in order to have a good grasp of the Lenormand technique that was designed for the cards. So it's interesting how different those are. We can really make up whatever meanings we want for tarot. Because somebody did that at some point in the late 18th century. Why not?
Well, I can't say much. I often tell people that, I can make any set of cards say whatever it is that I want.
Uh-huh.
And I say that only because of the fact that a lot of times, it's my intuition that's speaking. It's pulling something out of that card that's not traditional, that's not having to do with a set particular meaning for that particular card. It just, for that moment, it just is exactly what it is. And I could lay out, 3 tarot cards, 3 Lenormand cards, 3 T cards, 3 soul cards, and have the same exact thing show on every single one of them.
Oh, wow.
And it's mostly because of the style of reading that I have been so accustomed to with my intuition and the symbolic meanings, that there's always something on each card that my intuition can tune into regarding that certain question and come up with the same answers.
Right. Yeah, I actually took up Lenormand because I wanted to have a more fortune-telling system, because I use tarot much more, as some people call it, therapeutically. I'm very careful about the limits that I do, but it is, encouraging people to see what they see in the cards, and affirming when that's in alignment with traditional meanings. Or letting them at times just go on whatever journey they are and what they see in the cards. I'm much more open that way, but I was curious to see if I could work with a tool that was much more precise and even memorized. And it took me about 2 years, tremendous brain aches, not headaches, but actually feeling like my brain was aching as it made new connections as I learned the tradition of Lenormand. And I basically follow that traditional way of reading very closely, except every once in a while I was doing a grand tableau, all 36 Lenormand cards, for a woman who had a shamanic practice and was asking about. And suddenly I started seeing the cards at a whole other level that was much more shamanic. And I was going, oh, I'm sorry, you want to see a Lenormand reading, and I'm just going off in all these directions. She goes, no, keep going, keep going. So, I would say 90% of the time when I read Lenormand, I read very traditionally, and then there's that 10% where something takes over. And I just have to trust and follow it.
Yeah, and as a diviner, that's what we end up having to do. It's like we always have to trust whatever comes through over what we look at, because there's always a reason for it. And with Lenormands, I love Lenormands. I mean, I phrase them as, point blank, sometimes very blunt, in reference to the information that they provide, the answers that they give, T cards, which are based off of tea leaf symbols, for me, can be read like Lenormands in certain ways, but they're also a lot more fluid. They're a lot more forgiving. There's not as much structure. I'm not a structure person. I try to adhere to it with the Lenormands, but I also have those moments where, spirit or whatever it is that's guiding me at the moment says, hey, we're going off in this direction. And I'll go off in that direction. Yeah,
I just wanted to note that Lenormand cards developed out of coffee ground readings, because people started seeing that the oldest list of coffee ground and then eventually tea leaf readings usually had a fairly limited set of symbols that they would describe in those little throwaway books on fortune telling that were so popular in the 18th and 19th centuries. And what happened at the end of the 18th century was that someone came up with a set of coffee ground cards, and those are 30 of the 36 Lenormand cards. So Lenormand developed very quickly after that, at least the first version of it, called the Game of Hope. And that was a multi-dimensional card game that could be used for a Chutes and Ladders card game. And then in the instruction sheet it said, and also used for fortune telling with no instructions. So it took another 50 years for the instructions to get at least written down and specified for the rest of us. But yeah, there is that lineage that goes from the most basic, a house, a tree, certain animals like a fox, a bouquet, or sometimes roses, a bear, or a lion. Yeah, those are all standard iconography in the tasseography, which is coffee grounds or tea leaf readings, and in Lenormand.
See, I need to learn more on history.
It's fun. It really is. Once you have, that kind of comfort zone with the tool. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because I love all forms of divination. It's one of the reasons why I do the show that I do, is to highlight people within our community, to offer support, to discuss, different forms of divination from different systems, cultures, religions, traditions, and it never stops amazing me. All of the different styles and types of divination that are out there, that even some of our own listeners, may not even know exist. It's my contribution, because it's, I'm not much about book writing. I'm more of the, I'm the talker.
That's why you're doing this.
I'm an Irishman. We have that gift of the gab. We have to be, verbal, with a lot of things. So what other things do you have coming up? I mean, I know that you do a lot of, symposiums and conferences. What things are coming up for you in the course of the next 6 months to a year?
Well, the really big thing is the Omega Institute Tarot Conference, which is August 3rd to 5th. And that is going to be with several teachers. Let's see, there's Rachel Pollack and I have worked together at Omega for 25 years, and we've been teaching tarot classes. And then for the last several years, we've been doing a weekend conference. So this year we're bringing in Liz Dean, who did the Game of Thrones tarot and many other really popular, well-known tarot decks and books. Melissa Sanova, who did the Kitchen Table Tarot book, which has been a real way to access the cards for a lot of people, especially very young people who, again, are, as you said, kind of don't want to sit down and memorize meanings and learn systems, but really want to have that experience with the cards and develop their intuition. And she gives really good advice for just getting into it that way. And then George Corey, who doesn't have a book or deck out, but is an amazing medium and tarot reader, and used to be a clown with one of the major circuses. And so his style of teaching
I did not know.
is fabulous. Yeah. Oh, he's just an amazing teacher, and can really
I know he is. I'm going to have him on the show. I'll have him on the show too at some point. I didn't know about the clown part though.
Maybe I told a secret. But Rachel and I then are doing a 5-day workshop from August 5th to 10th. There's still time to sign up. And if anybody wants to make that last-minute decision to go to Rhinebeck, New York, upstate New York, upstate, anyway, to go to the Omega workshop for our conference, or the 5-day workshop with Rachel Pollack and myself, that is something I highly recommend. So that's the main teaching I'm doing for the rest of the year here. I will be in Montreal, and that is going to be in September 21st, for the inaugural Light and Love Tarot Reading Marathon and workshops. So I'll be doing something there. I'm going to be a keynote speaker at the Pittsburgh Pagan Pride event,
nice.
Which is in October. And I'm going to be, in November, I will be in China, if anybody wants to go there for a workshop. Both Rachel Pollack and I will be co-teaching workshops in Guangzhou, China. So that's the main things, I think, for the rest of the year. There's a possibility of a Women in Esotericism conference, but that's not finalized yet. So I don't know if that's actually going to be happening.
Well, you certainly do keep yourself busy. You know, here where I'm from, we would actually call Rhinebeck downstate.
Oh, didn't know
I'm a little
exactly
bit.
where
I'm
you
up
live,
in.
so.
I'm up in the Albany area, so.
Oh, well, you know, if you come to the workshop with Rachel and I, you will see our way of teaching the cards where you don't have to sit down and memorize anything. It will be right up your alley, and some going in depth in some of the cards to see how you can really make the most out of them.
Oh, I will have to look into that. I know I'm a little bit. I'm planning a few things at the moment,
Yes,
but I will have to take that look. You know, I have to say one thing. I have a guest who's been in our chat room who absolutely loves and adores you. He was the first person to pop in. You are like one of his favorites. He absolutely loves you. It's Professor Charles Porterfield. You know, wanted to say hi, so I just wanted to make sure that, you know, I gave that little shout out for him. He has
Hi,
been
Professor
waiting.
Charles.
You know, he has been waiting since I started posting that you were coming on. And initially he had a little bit of issues jumping in and out of the chat room, but he finally got in, and he was so happy. It was just like, so I wanted to just give him a shout out because, you know, he's always been a fan of yours, you know, especially your status as a historian, you know, of cards and cartomancy. And he says he would love to hear what you have to say about the German, I'm going to butcher this, but Kartenlotbuch, Lot-book from 1505.
Now, see, I'd have to go into my computer because my my memorization on any details about that is not very good, and I always have to get whatever German. I have to get a translation or a friend of mine who can read me a little bit of it. Of course, even native Germans today have trouble with those really old books. But one of the things about Lenormand that's very fascinating is that there was a deck that was done later in the States called the Gypsy Witch Tarot that had 56 cards, basically Lenormand with added cards. And they changed, there's correspondences to playing cards, and they changed those all around to fit into basically English and American understanding of reading playing cards and how they might associate with these picture cards that are Lenormand. But it didn't work with the original Lenormand cards. They've got associations to playing cards, but they don't fit any system that most of us are familiar with, except the old German system. And that's the Kartenlos books are the card fortune-telling books. That's what the term means. And those had a very different understanding. They had different suit markers. So you had bells, green leaves, red hearts, and black, well, let me see, it was black bells. I'm missing one thing, which I can't think right this second. And those meanings actually, although they were generally the same in that, you know, hearts were about love, just like traditional, but when you get to the green leaves, and acorns. Acorns were something that peasants ate, and therefore those were the problematic cards. But Germany wasn't a country in its own right until relatively, historically speaking, recently. Before that was a bunch of different principalities and dukedoms and whatever. And people who lived a half an hour away from each other might speak a different enough dialect that they wouldn't be able to understand each other easily. So all of those different groups would end up with their own variations on it, even though they had the general overview of generally each of the suits, the German suits, lent themselves in particular directions. But the details were different. So it's been very interesting trying to track down the closest system of details between the original German cartomancy system and the Lenormand cards, which is where my interest has been.
So, you know, when I started reading, my first deck of cards my grandmother picked up at an auction. She actually didn't even know what she was getting. I think Spirit was just telling her, you know, hey, reach into this box lot, grab this thing, and, you know, buy it. It was actually an 1850s deck that is called the Mary Redman Diviner's deck. It is a 54-card deck that is very similar to the Grand Jeu Lenormand without the astrological symbols. It's actually like the language of flowers and plants. Instead of the astrological, you've got the plants on the top. And you've got your primary picture on the bottom and your two smaller pictures on the top rather than the opposite way around. But for me, being symbolic reader, that was my deck of choice for like 15 years. I read nothing but that. And,
that's
and
one I have not taken on yet. I know which one you're talking about. Yes.
You know, and I own the, and I believe it's the actual original first deck. It's the old press board. It's all black and white. There's no back on it. You know, there's no pattern or anything else. Like, you know, I also own the colored version in the 1920 when they came out and they actually printed it.
Grimaud.
You know,
So
I
published for Grimaud, the Jeu de Lenormand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done that as a practical and symbolic style of reading that particular deck for years. I don't know all the real actual meanings of all the cards because I only had this tiny little pamphlet that came in, half of which I couldn't read. But for some reason it spoke to me, you know, so I've used it for years. I've scanned it and had a deck I could actually shuffle and use without having to worry about damaging, you know, something from 1850.
Well, I make a differentiation between card systems, individual ones like the Lenormand system, the tarot, you know, systems of reading. There's more than one, and what I call oracle cards. And I'm using this in the broadest generic sense. And anybody can use any deck or even postcards as an oracle deck. And that is kind of an open-ended or very personally derived symbol system that you work with intuitively. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it. You can use a Lenormand deck and create your own system, or just in the moment, whatever you happen to see, you can pick up the Grand Jeu de Lenormand, a set of flower cards, or as you said, the tea cards, tea leaf reading cards. If you want to read them as oracle, what I call this generic sense of oracle cards or oracle readings, then it comes from in you, and depending on individually whether you see it as messages from some form of guidance or divinity or angel beings, or whether you see it as a projective device that you're projecting onto, whatever your personal way of doing it is fine. And then I contrast that with the people who choose to work within a given system of reading, what was either devised originally when a deck was created by the creator, or with tarot, where there's been, you know, several hundred years of a pretty cohesive understanding of the cards, especially of the major arcana.
Yeah, and that's a lot. I mean, 78 cards. I mean, that's the other thing I think that throws me is, you know, I'm used to smaller decks. 78 cards. I don't have the greatest memory myself either. So I'm sitting there going, man, how am I going to memorize all these 78?
Yeah,
and
well, with the Rider-Waite deck, you don't have to memorize them. It's a little harder with the Marseille style, the French style tarot cards, but with the Rider-Waite, it's very easy to work with. And then other decks, depending on which ones speak to you.
Yeah, and I think that, and it's weird because every other style of deck, I'm very intuitive. I'm very symbolic. I'm very visual. Tarot, for some reason, I can't. I have never sat down and looked at that particular way. For some reason, I just keep beating myself up, saying, I'm really going to learn how to really read this system.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't work. When I first started trying to learn how to read, I had issues because there was color on the decks, and my initial deck that I read with for years was black and white. No color whatsoever. It was all I don't know if it was hand drawn, stamped, or it was just your drawings on each card, and there was no color to anything. So I read black and white for years, and when I started trying to introduce color, I don't know if it freaked me out or distracted me. It was something quite different. Now I love the fact that I can actually look at color, and I can look at, bones, and now I can look, with the bone readings, I can see 3-dimensional, and it brings more layers to everything.
Right.
Maybe I'm growing up.
Well, it's whatever works. I teach people rock reading. Reading with rocks that I give out randomly. Not pretty gemstones, just rocks. And I have a whole process that I take people through, and they end up with the rocks speaking. By the time they've gone through this step-by-step process, it takes them deeper and deeper into the rocks, the essence, knowing what that rock is about and how it communicates what it has to say. It's something I sometimes teach in the tarot classes in order to have people see that you can take some of that same sense over into your tarot readings when you are wanting to read intuitively.
Yeah, see, I love the intuitive styles. It's one of those things that I think empowers every person to break out of the box. There's nothing wrong with tradition. I'll say that because I love tradition. However, I do think that as every diviner develops, every diviner needs to break out of the box and let whatever is inside flow. And that could break rules. That could change things dramatically from system to system. And there's nothing wrong with that, because every single person is individual. None of us read the same. We could both use the same set of, the same deck of cards, have the same exact client, have the same 3 cards land, for that particular client, and read them in completely different ways, and yet still get valuable information that the particular client needs to have at that particular time.
Right. I do want to give a little bit of the other side, and this comes from me as a teacher for over 50 years, or actually I've been teaching for almost about 45 years, but doing the tarot for all that time. And that's a kind of critical dimension that most people don't bring, rightly so with beginners. So I think all beginners should stick their fingers in their ears and not listen to me for a couple of minutes. And the more advanced people can listen. And that's that intuition is not always right. And so many people, when they're telling people the one thing they need to learn when they're reading tarot or an oracle deck of any kind, is to absolutely trust their intuition. And I'm sorry, I've been on many tarot forums and Lenormand forums and other playing, cartomancy forums, and not everyone's intuition is helpful or even right if it's some very, specific information that is being looked for, yes, no answer about something that's going to happen in the near future or, predictive. Not everybody is right. I'm sorry. And they say, but I trusted my intuition. There have been some of the most in-depth research done by neuroscientists and neuropsychologists on intuition in the last 20 years. It's phenomenal what's been brought up by it. And they found that in general, intuition, which is the fastest way to get to knowledge of any of our brain resources that we have, it's putting things together instantaneously in a kind of gestalt or recognizing a pattern and seeing it. And in general, it tends to be about 50-50, correct or not correct. If it's in an area of your expertise, that goes up quite a bit, because knowledge and experience are the things that are going to up your ability to be correct with your intuition, because your brain has already made connections among various things and instantly recognizes a pattern.
Yes.
Even though then it can occasionally be wrong. The other thing is having a little checklist of particular things that you check to see if you've gone way off. Because another thing we do is that once we start seeing a story, is that we as human beings, we get locked into the story. And if we do that too quickly when we're doing readings, lock ourselves into this wonderful story we're telling and how, we can imagine that it would go on, we can get off point, off the topic, and get lost in the forest for it, and have this nice little story, but it really wasn't dealing with the person's issue. And so having these checklists where we go back and use the system as a way to very quick keywords, check your associations, and see, do you need to clarify something? The other end, of course, is, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, is being aware of your own biases, your own projections, your own assumptions about things. The more you can do processes, trainings that sensitize you to that, so that you know the feeling when you're right on, and you know the feeling when you've gotten off. And you begin to recognize those in yourself, which means you have to do a lot of personal work to get those to those places, to see your shadow.
I agree with that part 100%, because, I think sometimes often a little bit of ego sometimes plays a part in that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as human beings, we don't like to be wrong. I trust my intuition, but I also know my intuition is not always going to be 100% correct. I trust it because it has shown me over the years, little bells, little whistles, little signs, little things that stand out or, shake me, or sometimes give me the goosebumps or the little pimples, or, shivers up my spine when I hit right on point. I always know. I also know that when I don't feel those things, I know I need to take another look, and I need to see, okay, why am I not getting these normal signs that I always get when I have been correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to address that. I'm human. I'm a human being. We all make mistakes. I read, I give my advice, I give my readings based upon not just what I see, but also my own life experiences, what I have been through. If I haven't been through a situation for somebody, I normally will send them to somebody who has been, because, it's like women that have been in horrible, domestic violence, situations.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really read for them because I have never been in that situation. So for me, it's like I can't offer them the amount of information that could be very helpful for them. So I'll find somebody that has been, or that works with that particular type of situation, and I'll refer them to somebody, because I feel that, I would be doing somebody a disservice if I have not had certain experiences to try and do a reading and give them the best information that I could possibly give.
Well, I think, again, the more you're acting as that midwife, the more you can be with them in their own exploration, using the cards to point in directions for them to explore, and then affirming when you hear the truth in them, which is another thing that experience teaches us, to hear when someone is speaking their own truth versus when they're saying, well, do you think maybe that I'm right about this? I'm going, no. Whereas if they go, oh, you mean this? Oh, yes, I see exactly when I do that. You know, there's a total difference between those two different voices and all kinds of more subtle ways. And I think we can be there to some degree for people who, with experiences that we haven't had, if we're acting in that guide or midwife to their own process mode.
I'll have to look at it from a different point of view then, because, you know, I always refer people, you know, if I don't have an experience, I like to refer them out. And it's mostly because I haven't had those experiences yet. And maybe I need to start, you know, looking at it in a different light. You know,
well, we all have our limits. I don't do stock predictions, and I don't do medical, and I don't. Yeah, there's certain things that I absolutely certain kinds of questions that I don't feel capable of answering, and you know, I'm not a professional in that field. So yeah, we all have to find what, and that's having ethics when you know your own limits.
Yes. You know,
including legal limits.
You know, Professor Porterfield says, you know, this is also where tradition, you know, helps to ground us. You know, just as, you know, techniques help ground inspiration and artistry. You know,
exactly. That's what part of what I was getting at. You know, using those given meanings, the time-tested meanings and techniques as a counter check, or at any moment that you're feeling a little lost or that you need a different perspective on something. If you go back to those can either prime the pump for a new direction or counter correct some direction that you've gotten off on. If I look at a spread for someone and I suddenly, you know, I'm reading live with them, and I suddenly draw a blank on the card, the very first thing I do then is ask the person, oh, would you simply describe this card to me? You know, that very literal description. Because I've learned that there's something about that card that they know or that they'll bring up that I couldn't possibly have gotten to, or I wouldn't have gotten to without a lot of work, whatever it is, and that they will give the key to that right away. And so that's one thing I've learned to trust.
Yeah, well, you know, it's amazing. You know, it's amazing when, you know, and it's not just the asking them, you know, about a particular card. It's the method in which you ask. You know, if you're asking them, you're asking them to describe this particular card, what it is that they see or feel from this particular card. You know, it's so much different than, I have to word it this way, you know, fishing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've all seen in groups, you know, online and, you know, sometimes in person, you know, the fishing questions, you know, does this seem to fit? Does this seem to, you know, it's the yes or the no question that you can tell, okay, here's somebody that seems to be lost in their reading.
Yeah,
and
the fake psychic reading too. I mean, you can go pretty far with that kind of fishing expedition. It's totally different when you come from a point of view of open-ended curiosity, of truly opening yourself to not knowing and letting the client be right or letting the client show the way. And I consider it a true art of the art of asking questions where you don't know the answer. You keep yourself as open as possible and see what the person is going to bring up. You can go so much deeper, so much faster in a reading when you do that and really get to the real meat of it rather than staying just on the surface.
Right. And, you know, I think the interactive approach with clients is, you know, something that's, you know, highly needed. I mean, your client has to be invested in their reading, you know, the same way that you're invested in reading for them. You know, And sometimes they'll just sit there and they'll look at the cards, and the minute the cards fall, they'll look straight at one, point one out, and they'll be like, oh my God, I know this. This is blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Sometimes literally something that happened that day or the day before, or something from a dream. Yeah, I've seen that happen.
I have too, but you know what? I find, the times that I've done readings for people and they have, looked at the cards before I have a chance to even open my mouth, they'll see one particular card. Whatever they normally say is the reason they really walked in the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've come in completely, and just like as a reader or a diviner, we try to remain open, to all the information, all the energies, the spirit guides, the ancestors, whatever it is that we work with, and to have clients come in and they are completely open like that. And they're like some of the easiest people to read for because they basically do it all themselves. And they give themselves the answers, and we are there to guide them along.
And when you say it's easy, it's both easy because it flows beautifully and it's so rewarding, but it's also difficult because as a reader, you have to put your whole attention into being present for your client. And when you're reading cards and you're just kind of telling the querent, the client, what the cards mean, it's almost like people can be talking to themselves and they just go off in whatever their own, stuff is that they see there, and they might be right on, but it's easy. They just keep talking. They do a flow, and the client can take away from it whatever it is that they want or they get out of it. I know quite a few readers who are like that. Some extremely good at what they see, and some not. But when you're doing that more interactive, you have to be fully, absolutely, totally present to the client and really hear what they have to say. And that is, I don't want to say draining because it isn't. I find it kind of exhilarating, but it is a level of complete focus that if you're just telling somebody what the cards mean, doesn't have to be there.
That I will agree with, because as a diviner, I'm also a medium, I'm a clairvoyant, clairaudient, I draw upon a lot, so there's times where right in the middle of a reading, one of their ancestors will chime in, and they normally do it with odd things that I myself would never come up with. Like I did a reading for my friend John, and in the middle of his reading, a message was coming through from an older female in his family, and I couldn't pick who it was because the only thing she kept doing was smacking her lips. It was like, somebody, almost like somebody chewing gum.
Uh-huh.
And I sat there, and it went on for probably like, 10 minutes into the reading. I turned around to him and I said, look, I said, I have to interject. I said, because one of your guides, one of your ancestors is just not stopping with this. And I explained this to, exactly what was going on, what sound I was hearing. And he started laughing and he goes, that would be my grandmother. My grandmother used to chew gum and smack her lips all the time. And it was basically kind of like doing that. It was her way of getting somebody's attention.
Whoa.
And I was just like, well, now I know why she wasn't stopping. She was getting my attention, which was to get your attention as to the information coming up, because this is something that she wanted you to be aware of and that you hadn't been paying attention to.
Uh-huh.
And, and it never ceases to amaze me, some of the connections that we make with our clients, both on the physical as well as the spiritual level. I love when guides come through and start giving information to me, because at that point, cards don't really exist. It's more give and take freely of the information exchange that's taking place.
Mm-hmm.
But it also can be kind of, I will say, draining, because it is at that point drawing upon areas that take a lot of energy and a lot of focus, you know, to be able to stay in that particular moment, you know, with my client.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
You know.
It's totally different than casual conversations. You know, somebody saying, oh, you know, what do you think I should do about this, you know, this guy? And, you know, when you're just sitting around talking, it's a completely different thing when you're doing a reading.
Yes, well, because it's not normal conversation, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we structure it in a way where it sounds like normal conversation, but I mean, it's very spiritually based and very empowering to our clients to open them up, you know. I don't want to do all the work for them, you know. I want to give them the tools that they need to be able to do the work for themselves.
Yeah.
You know. So what now you have, we said you've got about 11 or 12 books, you know, you've got all these classes coming up, and you're going to China.
Yeah, I've been there, I think 4 times so far, so this will be the 5th time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, do you speak Chinese?
No, I did take classes for a while because I like to at least have some basics. But at my age, with my lack of being able to remember things very well, it was just more than, I mean, I would have had to have devoted myself full time to studying for probably a year or 2 to make any progress. So I kind of had to let it go. But I've had really good translators. Yeah.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So as a well-seasoned historian, educator, phenomenal being, for all the new people that are coming into divination, you know, Tarot or Lenormand, what is one thing that you would recommend that they work on? You know, not necessarily card-based, but, you know, how to become, you know, what they should have in their toolkit to become a better reader or a better diviner.
You know, we have so many tools out there, from the whole, you know, personal development, the metaphysical and psychic development programs, that there's, you know, I hate to mention any one because it's kind of like what you're drawn to at a particular time, what resources are around you, what speaks to you. I would say probably some form of meditation, whether it's through a spiritual group or it's mindfulness meditation, is pretty much essential because it can help you with any personal development work and creativity and life planning and all kinds of things. It can help you with studies. So definitely some form of meditation, not that you have to do it every single day, you know, for an hour or anything like that. I'm terrible at doing things consistently. So I go in and out of periods where I'm doing it regularly and then where I kind of let it trail off and then remind myself what a wonderful tool it is and come back.
I do the same. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, you know, one of the things that you're saying without mentioning individual things is, you know, aside from learning your particular tool, you know, aside from learning the tradition or the type of cards you're going to read, you know, spend the time to develop yourself spiritually. You know, spend some time, whether it is with psychic development work or whether it is with mindful meditation, whether it is with, you know, any form of spiritual enlightenment.
And psychological, you know, doing shadow work in Jungian or neo-Jungian kind of way, or nonviolent communication. There's wonderful workshops and books about nonviolent communication that will help you tremendously in communicating with people. Yeah, there's there's so much. We're really rich in these kinds of experiential things, and a lot of them are on YouTube now. So if you seriously sit down, or on podcast, sit down and take the time to do the things that are being recommended, along with whatever video or audio mechanism you're listening to. You can get a ton of learning that was just beginning to appear in the late 60s and through the 70s, and really getting developed in the 80s, and widespread now, totally widespread.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the amount of things that that the community offers now all over. You don't even have to leave your home. I mean, it's also one of the scary parts about, technology is you don't ever have to leave your home. But there is something to say about, leaving your home, going to, I've been to a number of pagan events, gatherings, spiritual endeavors, large, one in my 20s, called Starwood, we had like over 2,000 people,
Right. Yeah.
It was huge, and it was a large group of like-minded individuals, teaching and sharing and enjoying life and enjoying all the beautiful things and the spiritual aspects of everything, and just coming together for celebration. And
there's one in the San Francisco area, actually San Jose, called Pantheacon, which goes on for 4 to 5 days. And that's, at any one time there can be 20 different workshops or rituals happening in all the different broadly pagan traditions. So it's a way to go and see which ones you align with, or what teachers you like, and find out about different events and things that are happening all across the United States. And there's people from all around the world who come and who teach. So there's quite a few on the different coasts primarily, and a few in the center of the country. Definitely conferences, workshops. If you get a chance to study with somebody that whose work you admire, I really recommend it. I think you can go much farther, much faster in even a weekend with someone than you can studying out of the books on your own. But then you go back to the books with new eyes, with new understanding, and get them at much deeper levels. Yes,
because right now normally I would be trying to go to an event here in New York. It's down in Sherman, New York. It is Sirius Rising, which is another 5-day festival type thing, where they teach classes and they have courses and meditations and, drumming throughout the night. God, I miss the drumming throughout the night.
Yes.
It's one of those beautiful things, that reawakens you to things that, you might not have thought about for a long time, or new things that just pop into your life that stoke the fires again. And then you go back to your books, you go back to your learning, and you look at things, and everything now looks completely different. And now you take away more, and you develop everything even more.
Plus, you get to meet so many people at these different events and classes that often become lifelong friends, a support network for your work. A lot of times, especially in the early days, we would have people who were first meeting each other on the early tarot forums. And at the Omega Institute, we had several times that people who had only known each other through the forums would agree to come together to one of the courses, the workshops that Rachel Pollack and I teach, and would both meet each other and get to bond really closely with each other, as well as getting to know us. And many of us have remained friends for over 20 years, meeting like that.
Yeah, and it's wonderful when we meet people that are, have so many things in common that we have. It's a completely different type of friendship than friends that we would have outside of the tarot community or the spiritual community. There's I find there's a lot more depth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where the conversation immediately can go into those deeper places. And yeah, sharing. Someone was interviewing me the other day, and she's just beginning to be, she's a professional journalist, but is just beginning to be a professional tarot reader. But we found we were immediately very deep into the experience of reading cards because her own natural inclinations were exactly along the same line as mine. And so we were suddenly, in the depths of it, having met, for 5 or 10 minutes and, a soul sister. It was quite wonderful.
And that's the way I would describe it too. It's a soul sister, because you make that instantaneous connection, and it's like a mirror of your experiences and your likes, and it's like, man, it's almost like I'm talking to myself, and it's like but another version of me, because they're on the same plane. They're on the every level playing field. They have same experiences. They're interested in the same things, and we could literally just talk for hours. Like, I've known you for years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And it's affirming that we're not crazy, that these things really do exist and that they're really valuable, that we, find a very meaningful, deep, rich, rewarding life in studying and practicing these things. And that's another level of it, is the kind of high that comes from meeting other people and realizing how rich our lives are through our studies and our work in these areas.
Yes, and it's amazing. I want to give a shout out again to Professor Porterfield, who has been nonstop sitting in chat, listening intensely, because he loves you to death. I also want to make mention of the Mile High Conjure Gala coming up in September 29th and 30th, out in Colorado, I believe. Denver, yes.
I would imagine. I'm guessing Mile High City.
It is definitely going to be in Denver. So they're going to be teaching classes on, conjure and hoodoo and root work and bone readings, with people such as Candelo Cambisa, Loretta Leedsma, Elaine Bryant and Brother R.J. James, Professor Ames, Beverly Smith, Professor Porterfield will be there, as well as Ambrosine Legree, Michael Cardenas, Michelle Jackson, incredible bone reader, Hoodoo San Jose, as well as Miss Ada. There are still a couple of spots left, so if people are interested in going, go to conjuregala.com, and you can find out more information there. Now, you have a website yourself. Yours is actually listed as your personal site, marykgreer.com, where they can...
Hello?
I am hearing myself.
I can hear you.
Nope, I was hearing myself because I accidentally hit a page, and it started playing the audio. At the same time. So your website is marykgreer.com. This carries all the information about you, about, classes coming up, your different publications, how people can contact you. And this is actually your tarot blog, correct?
Yes, it's primarily a blog. I don't always keep up with the other sections, keeping them up to date. Bad girl. But I do... write in my blog, and looking back through the archives, there's tons of historical articles. There's articles on reading with different Lenormand and tarot techniques, spreads. Some of the blog posts are specifically for beginners, so they're you can go through the categories and see quite a few blog posts on Pamela Coleman Smith and the research that I did on her, all kinds of things.
Now, would that be also how our listeners get a hold of you, or if they want to reach you, ask questions, or schedule readings with you? I mean, is that the best place for them to reach out for you?
There's a contact page on there if they want to contact me, and it's best to go through that.
Okay. So is there anything else that you have coming up book-wise, or anything else that we have not touched upon that you would like to make mention of?
Not real specific. I've got a couple of book things that I'm supposed to be working on, but it's not at a stage that it really, I should mention anything at this point. I do, since we were talking about conferences, want to mention that every year at the end of April, I believe, is Reader's Studio in New York, which is a big conference.
Yes.
It usually fills up pretty quickly, but that's a wonderful way to meet tarot readers. And then there's the Northwest Tarot Conference, which is a little earlier in the year. So I think February, March, somewhere around in there. Northwest Tarot, it's called NWT, the NWT, Northwest, NWTS conference. And so there's one on either coast, and then occasionally other ones show up, different conferences. But those are the two main ones right now that are going on. And tarot people are incredibly friendly. We really try to break down the difference between the professional reader or the teachers and the new people who are coming and the students. We are a community together, and we try to promote that.
And it's one of the things that I love. I have not been to one as of yet. I have talked to a number of people that have been both as participants and as teachers, and they all say the same thing, that it is an incredibly wonderful place for people to come together that are so friendly, so inviting, so willing to share and help people to learn, the not just tarot, but also Lenormands, so many wonderful and beautiful people. And all the pictures I've seen over the years, they've all had smiles from ear to ear,
Yes.
They speak so highly of, the expertise, of the people that are there, the friendliness, the way that they put everything together, as well as how high the energy is all day long.
It is. It truly is. And I think there's something about tarot, because I've been to conferences in some of the other fields where there's definitely a hierarchy, and you have to be part of the in crowd if you're going to sit with a group of people. At the tarot conferences, you can go up to any group of people and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. Can I listen in, join you?" And they probably have already welcomed you in and said, "Yes, sure, come to lunch with us, do something with us." Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. One of these days I will make it. God willing.
I hope
Hopefully,
so.
Maybe I'll even take my laptop and maybe I'll do a divination show while I'm there.
That would be
with
wonderful.
With a series of mini interviews with different people throughout the course of the event, because that's also one of the things that I have been thinking about as well.
Yeah,
taking the show on the road.
And you'll find that the participants are often just as experienced and wise and brilliant and giving as the speakers are. We just draw so many wonderful people.
I know quite a few that have been there. A few have been on my show. Ronna George, love her to death.
Mm-hmm.
George Curry's going to be coming,
yes,
on the show as well. I've got some few hidden talents I haven't mentioned as of yet, but I haven't booked them yet. So.
Okay.
but I will. I like to keep a couple things on hidden in the hat, to pull out. It makes for a more interesting show. Would you like to say our final goodbyes to our beautiful audience?
Yes. Well, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you. I really enjoyed it and finding out a lot about what you do. I hope everybody has learn some different perspectives to think about, see what works for you and what doesn't.
And I am so happy, and I've been so blessed to be able to have you on the show. It's been a tremendous, honor having one of who I consider to be, like one of the most giving people, in the community. Your whole life's work, to have somebody that has given so much to the community and has spent their entire life, for the most part, going through and showing and sharing with the rest of us that want to continue to learn and elevate. You are an absolutely beautiful soul, and I've been so enjoying having you on the show today.
I'm blushing. Thank you very much. And I'm lucky to have found something I love this much, the people and the work.
Yes, I agree 100%. It's phenomenal when we do things that we love and we can enjoy life and the people that surround us. That's what life really is, doing what we love doing, spending time with those that we love, sharing those moments together, and, lifting everybody up to new levels and new heights, and just smiling and enjoying everything.
Yes.
So I want to thank all of our listeners for a beautiful and wonderful show this week. I hope to see you all next week right here on the Divination Table.
You might want to sit down for this, because the country that put a man on the moon, invented monster trucks, and gave the world beatboxing is at it again. Dunkin' Donuts is proud to introduce Donut, wait for it, fries. Donut fries. That's right, fries that are donuts. Sugary, cinnamon-sprinkled, warm, crispy, doughy, flavory fries that can't wait to become an American favorite. So, you gotta ask yourself, do you want Dunkin' Donut fries with that? America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary, limited time offer.
Hey folks, Dirk Bentley here. If you've seen one of my concerts, you know I'm all about energy. Performing, recording, traveling, being a husband and a father, it's a busy life, and I need to be 100% every day. So when my battery starts running low, I grab a sugar-free, vitamin-packed 5-hour energy shot. It tastes great, and it gets me back to 100% fast. Try it. It could work for your busy life too. For more information, visit 5hourenergy.com.